Hi, everyone. My name is Shreyas, and I'm a co-founder at Llama. I'm going to talk today about Coase in the 21st century and how Coase Theorem applies to DAOs and specifically contributor DAOs. As I said, I'm a co-founder at Llama. Llama basically works with DAOs on protocol engineering, treasury management, and on-chain analytics. We have worked with Aave, Uniswap, Nouns, Pool Together, Lido, Maker, and a bunch of other top protocols. We work with protocols on one side, and we also have a thriving contributor community at Llama. So we have 60+ contributors that work on, again, analytics, engineering work. And our focus is to provide the best quality service for the DAOs, but also to build an amazing contributor experience for our community. And I also personally am a fan of llamas, and multiple llama T-shirts. I've been inspired by Vitalik's 2017 TechCrunch talk, where he wore this llama T-shirt on a unicorn, and I hope to beat his collection with mine. So to start off, what is Coase Theorem? So in the 1930s, an economist, Ronald Coase, asked a simple question of why do firms exist? It seems simple to begin with, but actually it is quite an important question. Like, why doesn't everyone, as an individual, just contract out their services and kind of sell their services instead of sort of joining together forces as a firm? So, for example, at Google, why do we have an engineer and a designer and a lawyer and an accountant and a product manager all work together at Google? Versus why can't they just sort of be subcontractors, still working towards the same direction, but not sort of employed full-time by Google? And the reason is that firms reduce transaction costs. There's a bunch of costs involved in coordinating all these services between different people, and that cost is not mediated extremely well by a fully free market economy, and you kind of need the firm as an entity to mediate that. There's three types of transaction costs. The first one is triangulation. So how hard is it to find and measure a quality of a service? So how hard is it to find someone, say, an engineer who can do this particular work? And how hard is it to evaluate how good they are? So that is actually extremely hard. So if you can imagine the costs involved in recruiting, big companies spend millions of dollars in that and still get it wrong many of the times. And if you want to do that every day or on a per project basis, for a lot of cases of specialized work at companies, it really doesn't make sense. It makes sense in some cases, like a construction company having contractors to do construction work, but in most cases, it doesn't make sense. The second type of transaction cost is transfer. So how hard is it to bargain and agree on a contract for the good and service? This, again, is extremely costly in most specialized work. So, for example, if you want to negotiate with an engineer and a designer on a scope of work that is, a product, it actually takes quite a bit to arrive at, what the terms and conditions should be, what the price should be. And if you have to renegotiate this every time, it's just like a waste of resources for the firm. And lastly, there's a question of trust. And so whether the counterparty is trustworthy and whether there's some recourse. So is the particular individual that you're dealing with trustworthy? If you're dealing with the same individual and there's vested equity for 5 years, for 4 years, it's easier to have that trust. If this person is changing every day or every 2 weeks or every month, it becomes harder. And same with the company side. It's one thing if the firm is Google, but if there's many different types of firms and you're an individual engineer trying to freelance your services, you do need to trust that the other party will pay for those services. And of course, you have the legal system that is a sense of recourse that can sort of get you recourse in case there's one bad party. But the legal system is only a worst-case scenario thing, and you actually typically don't want to use the legal system. You want to have trust embedded in the sort of arrangement that you have with this other party. The internet has reduced transaction costs. So if you think about some of the things that weren't possible before, people have basically been able to to directly offer their services to other folks through the internet, and almost like disintermediating a bunch of middlemen. And there's few services where this is especially true. One example is, say, Uber drivers, where an individual Uber driver, individual driver can now get riders and have their services, be paid for in a standard way. You have payment, you have recourse, you have bargaining power, all done in quite a standard way. You have things like Airbnb, where an individual can lease out their property. You have Fiverr and Upwork, where freelancers, especially designers, can offer their services to other companies. And so this has generally been a positive for some types of gig economy type work. But transaction costs are still extremely high for work that is highly specialized and that requires complex coordination. And most specialized, interesting work does require complex coordination. So it's one thing to offer the service of an Uber driver where you get someone from A to B, and it's a very, very specific service. But if you're doing anything like contributing to an open source project or building a product, it requires a bunch of different types of skill sets and almost sustained coordination over a long period of time. As more value has come to the internet, as we all know, there's a need for that value to be almost internet native, and blockchains, of course, are extremely essential in helping this happen. One of the key features of blockchains is they are these virtual computers that can make commitments. They can make long-term, credible commitments to developers and users, where someone can build an application on top of blockchains and not have a fear of being rugged or have fear of platform lock-in. And given that blockchains have these nation-state-like properties where they have, Ethereum has contract enforcement, Ethereum has property rights in the metaverse, Ethereum has a bunch of rules and governance that actually can dictate how people build and use Ethereum. Those same properties then extend to the DAOs and protocols that build on blockchains like Ethereum. And so these DAOs also are then internet native organizations that can make long-term commitments. I view a DAO as an entity that is at its core governed by smart contracts instead of legal contracts. And so you have key features of the organization, such as membership, ownership, key assets and property of the organization, and the constitution of the organization basically be governed by code on the blockchain rather than by the legal system. And so when you have more of these on-chain entities kind of interact with each other, you have this very new, interesting type of economy that is internet native and that shares the same language with the underlying protocols that they're built on top of. So three key features of decentralized organizations are, one, that that they have open source software, which is this extremely, still I think, undervalued thing, the fact that you actually just need to solve a problem once, and after that, someone can build on top of your existing Lego, someone can use it, deploy it in another interesting way. And the openness extends not just to software, but generally communications in these DAOs. So if you think about the default in DAOs like Aave and Uniswap and Pool Together and all these other protocols, the default is you have Discourse, which is this open governance forum where anyone can comment. The Discords are typically open, where people can just jump in and add value. And you have the treasury itself is open. You actually have the books of accounts open, and this community can decide how it's being allocated. The second piece is permissionless capital formation. So something really interesting in DAOs that happened last year was Constitution DAO, where they were looking to basically raise capital for buying the U.S. Constitution, and they raised capital from everyone around the world, like I think it was thousands of people, and raised $40 million in 2 weeks. And it was really interesting because it was permissionless, where anyone can contribute to buying this Constitution if they had an Ethereum address and they had the capital. And you didn't have to mediate with the existing legal system. And you could also immediately distribute ownership of that shared property. They didn't end up buying the constitution, but you could distribute ownership of that shared property to thousands of people around the world with a click of a button instead of requiring complex legal process. And the third piece is, of course, liquid labor, which is you don't have these costs of immigration and other costs that nation states impose, and you actually can have one person contribute to several DAOs, one person contributes pseudonymously, or in some cases, people just kind of working remotely and building their reputation without it being associated with their real identity. As this sort of piece of the economy grows, contributing to protocol DAOs, I think, will be an extremely important piece of what the future work looks like. If you think about what protocols are, like they start off as these open source, there's open source code that is deployed on the blockchain that people start using. It initially, if you take the example, say, of Aave, it initially starts with, so Aave is a lending protocol, initially starts with a few people, core engineers in the Aave team, deploying Aave on the Ethereum blockchain, and then letting people borrow and lend on Aave. And soon, you kind of need this protocol to do more things. You kind of need the protocol to be upgraded, to be maintained. You need a bunch of functions that the core team actually doesn't want to do themselves because they just want to focus on core development, and it's sort of best for the longevity of the protocol for a bunch of other contributors to add value to it. So in Aave's case, Aave's built Aave v1, Aave v2, Aave v3. They've built they're building a stablecoin called Go. But there's an open surface for contributors and for governance to add value to Aave in different ways. So one example is asset listings. So what assets can you list on Aave? That is up to the community. That's up to really anyone, including Llama. And we work on a lot of these asset listings where you can kind of step up and you can decide if it falls within the general risk framework of what Aave needs. And you write a smart contract to add a new asset to Aave. This applies to cross-chain deployments. So deploying Aave on another blockchain is something that the community approves. It applies to Oracle updates. So for example, if you want to change the Oracle source for Aave, that's something the community can do. It applies to risk parameter updates. It applies to treasury allocations. And so there's actually a whole host of work that is not going to be done by this core team of 5 or 50 full-time Aave employees, but it's going to be done by really anyone from around the world with an Ethereum address, and anyone can kind of step in and add value to Aave and get paid directly from the treasury for doing that. But one of the issues with that is that it's actually extremely hard as an individual to directly contribute to a protocol. I actually started out this way, where I directly contributed to Aave and to Uniswap and a bunch of these projects, and it's very hard. And there's a bunch of reasons it's hard. One reason is it kind of requires a complex coordination to get anything done. So for example, an asset listing in Aave requires risk analysis. It requires governance work. So you actually need to have 80,000 Aave tokens delegated to you, which is worth like $30 to $40 million. You need to have sort of smart contract expertise to actually do this on chain, and you kind of need to have a trust of Aave. Like, who is this random person listing an asset? Should it be listed by someone who's credible? And so, like I said, the future of work is really interesting in terms of contributing to protocols, but it's extremely hard as an individual to do it directly in most high-impact types of work. And that's where the contributor DAO comes in, which is a DAO that exclusively contributes to other DAOs. It consists of part-time or full-time contributors that have specialized skill sets. So they could be engineers, or they could be designers or DeFi strategists, and they work at their own pace. So they're not employed by the contributor DAO. They do work with these other DAOs. So they work with Aave, or they work with Uniswap, or they work with Nouns DAO, but they don't work directly for them. They work through a contributor DAO, like Llama. And so the income that sort of comes from the DAOs goes to the shared community treasury of the contributor DAO, and the contributors get paid from that. But more interestingly, the contributors actually have an ownership over the contributor DAO. So this is, it's almost like for lack of a better analogy, like a software-powered labor union, where the contributor DAO accrues this bargaining power, and the contributors actually have ownership and can decide how the treasury is being deployed, what happens to the contributor DAO, which DAOs we work with, and a bunch of other decisions. And so you actually have the power and the responsibility kind of go to the end contributors instead of being mediated by some middleman. The contributors also benefit from, this is extremely important in contributor protocols, benefit from increased governance influence. So as an individual, it's kind of hard to have governance influence over a project because, let's say you're a smart contract engineer or you're a risk analyst, you kind of want to focus on one or two things you do. You don't want to deal with the whole sort of business development and political process of having governance influence to get something through to Aave. And that's something the contributor DAO can help with, where it almost provides this huge, powerful umbrella for these contributors to really have a high impact and be more productive. Contributors also can have recourse. So that's something that is hard to have directly with the DAO, but through the contributor DAO with this bargaining power, if there's some issue with the DAOs we work with, you actually can have recourse. Like, payment is more easily done. We have early signs of this at Llama, where it's quite interesting, where we have several contributors who are making more than a full-time income, over $100,000 a year, working through Llama through a bunch of interesting opportunities while they are still working full-time jobs or they are contributing to several other DAOs. In some cases, these people are, they have a reputation in sort of their real identity world. Maybe they are a senior person at Coinbase or another company, but they want to build a pseudonymous reputation, and Llama is kind of a pathway for them to do that. And they find interesting work to do at Llama as they build their pseudonymous reputation, and at some point maybe their pseudonymous reputation competes with their real life reputation. And then you have this other very important focus is kind of optimizing the experience for the contributors. So making sure that there's enough work for them. There's internal tooling that can help scale their contributions. There's an increase in well-being and productivity. And there's a real focus on them as much as there is on the DAO. So to summarize, like the contributor DAO, reduces transaction costs for contributors working for protocols in a bunch of ways. One, there's in the triangulation setting, it is easier to find work, and so as an individual, if you're trying to find work with DAOs, it is difficult because you have to have some governance influence and you have to deal with the sort of protocol directly. If you're a contributor working at a contributor DAO, you kind of have this open access to work, and as long as you build a reputation and are produce reasonably quality of work, you can continue to get this endless stream of work. One thing that is difficult to measure is definitely the quality of work. When I say difficult, I just mean it's not entirely automatable, of course. It is manual, but I think there's some interesting reputation systems and sort of token and social incentive design systems where you can account for the measurement of quality of work piece bit too. The second piece is transfer, which is it's easier to kind of bargain, agree on a contract for a piece of work, and so for the DAO to actually have a particular piece of an asset listing sort of scoped out and it being done within this time frame, it's just easier to do through a contributor DAO. And the last piece is, of course, the counterparty is trustworthy and there's some sense of recourse. So yeah, like I think that was it on my end. I think if you're interested in following more about Llama, you can either message me on Twitter at hello Shreyas or follow us at Llama at Llama is our Twitter handle. Llama.xyz is our website. And let me know if you have any questions after this. I'll be hanging around. Thanks.